6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. We have commit and we have liftoff at 2:13. 5 million pounds of thrust, and it has cleared the tower.
Prepare yourself for a world of science.
Good morning, everybody. Conley here. Science Nights in the morning. We have Dr. Thomas Shiller and Dr. Sean Graham in the house. And, well, we have a really interesting and very unique show for you today because we're going to be talking about some anomalies in science that are just recently coming to light. And there's a lot of stories when it comes to science right now. And it has to do with not only our own biology and our own kind of perception of how we see the evolutionary process kind of going, but it also kind of debunks a lot of our own prerequisites that we've kind of come to. So I'm just going to go ahead and start it off.
First, a disclaimer.
Okay.
Sean and I have no clue what you're about to talk about.
You have no idea.
Yeah, Conley just discovered this, so we're going to be surprised by this.
It
better not have to do with Sasquatch or aliens or
aliens. Well, one is some.
It's about aliens, isn't it, Conley?
There's one about aliens, but there. I wasn't going to start with that.
Okay.
But I thought this was great because I talked about it this week on the show, and it really intrigued a lot of people because when we're kids and we're young. And, our kids, ask us, let me ask both of you, have your kids asked you why the sky is blue?
No, my kid just eats his boogers.
Okay, all right, well, Sean?
Yeah. No, he hasn't thankfully, he hasn't started the annoying why phase yet.
Well, what age is that why phase? Because there's all these questions out there.
Yeah, he's coming up on it, I think. But right now he's just he's real cool and he just likes to learn new words. And so, he's got to the point now where it's not just a whale, it's a bowhead whale.
Oh,
He's figured out that there's different kinds of different things, and he's just his mind's just gobbling up all that stuff. And yeah, I imagine, it's not the questions why are really interesting, and it's cool. We should hold on to that because that's really what science is continuing to ask those questions.
Right.
Why?
Yeah.
And try to figure out the answer. But what I'm not looking forward to is go to your room and then he asks why.
Right.
And then the answer is because I told you to. And I'm not looking forward to that. And I think those two phases come at exactly the same time. So that's what I meant by I'm glad he hasn't hit that yet.
Yeah, right before they start listening to Rage Against the Machine and
yeah. Well, that's what Black Sabbath is for, man. That's how we made our release in those that's what answered all those questions. But what I pose right now is I thought it was such a cool dilemma that we can find ourselves in. We think we know all these things in the universe, right? And in our own world that we can very with all this kind of evidence. We have arrays and plethoras of evidence that we can tell our kids, okay, here's why this happens, right? And I had this kind of imaginary thought in my head. So researchers say they finally figured out the first off, the mutation that gives electric eels their zap just recently. But I'm not alluding to this. We're going to talk about that a little bit later, probably in the next segment. But the same thing is that giraffes, their long necks, okay, might not just be about reaching tall plants. Now, I thought this was so cool because you imagine little Susie walking up to you and tugging on your, coattail or whatever. And she's like, why do giraffes have long necks, Dada? And then you look down and the sun is just gleaming off her innocent little cranium. You kind of peer inside of her head and see that little hamster just kind of going through the whole spinning motion, just absorbing all the knowledge around her. And you just say, so they can headbutt each other to death. And that's what the science is talking about right now, is that evolution kind of caused them to more effectively headbutt each other through an act of domination and spread their seed. We're talking about, Darwinism in its purest form, I guess you could say. What do you think about that?
I think that's a behavior that has been observed for a long time. The whipping of the heads for giraffes, and Sean probably knows more about this, but I always talk about that in any dinosaur related class I teach, because it's thought that maybe the big long necked dinosaurs did something similar to that. But it is kind of cool to think about whether or not it was truly them, reaching up to the canopy and it became beneficial for food gathering, or whether it was some combination of that and competition, because it all has to do with survival and reproduction.
Well, it kind of brings me back to Sean, our animal violence episode that we had, talking about like animal violence and the survival of the fittest fighting to be the most dominant, and it was really interesting that this study kind of made headlines this week, mainly because I don't know, maybe they're looking for news or what, but it is pretty interesting that now we can tell, little Susie down there that, it's much more violent than she would think, right?
Yeah, and it's an interesting hypothesis, and, for some features where it's an extreme feature, sometimes that sort of thing, we call it runaway, evolution, runaway selection, where, something like a peacock's tail is just the most absurd thing ever. And it can actually be, disadvantageous to the male to have this thing. And that might be kind of part of the interesting part of it. But it's clearly been selected for somehow, and it's just running away. It's going rampant. And the long neck of a giraffe could, feasibly be the end result of runaway selection for having, using their neck essentially as a arm wrestling device. There's a couple of problems with it. They're not terrible, completely hamstringing problems, but usually those kind of features would be only found in males. And you find the long neck of giraffes, it's in both sexes. There are some examples of, essentially traits that you associate with males that are found in both males and females. So like caribou, they have both males and females have antlers. And there's really not much big difference between the size of those two antlers. And so that does happen. And I don't think we have a really good explanation for why that is, why you find, males and females with what look like weapons for fighting. Which usually is super easy to tell in the test. If you think it's because of sexual selection, if you think it's for fighting, if it's in males only, I mean, you can almost guarantee it. But it's not. And for example,
what about the horn on the rhino?
Well, so the horn on rhino is found in males and females, but it's much longer in the males. It's more well developed. Same thing with tusks in elephants. So there you go. I mean, you can find little short stubby tusks in female elephants, but the males, they're really extreme, really long. So giraffes have a weapon, and it's not just their neck, and it's very unique among the hoofed mammals. They have bony projections coming out of their head called ossicones. And I'm going to plead ignorance here because I'm not a mammologist, and even if I was a mammologist, I probably wouldn't know this. I'm not sure if it's bigger in the males versus the females. I would guess it is. And so the males definitely battle for dominance in giraffes, and they have something to do it with. And it's not, they use their neck also, but that could be just incidental, right? So this is one of the classic cases where you don't know whether the mule is in front of the cart or not. And here's the thing I'll mention about this. It could have been selection for getting your neck out there to feed on vegetation and then later used for battle, or it could have been used for battle and then later used for getting vegetation. It's one of those two possibilities, or maybe a third we haven't thought of. But when it comes to questions like these, I always ask myself, how would you test the question?
Okay.
And that's where, sometimes these kind of cockamamie ideas like this, and I will admit, paleontology is rife with these kinds of questions because you can't answer them because the animal's extinct. And, you can argue all day whether or not a tyrannosaur was a carnivore or a scavenger, and you'll never know the answer. And there's no way to test it.
Yeah, but the questions themselves evolve.
The questions are interesting and they're worth positing. But what I'm saying here is that focus on the questions you can test and forget about these ones that you could test the question about tyrannosaur scavenger versus carnivore, but it's going to take somebody discovering an incredible, perfectly intact skeleton of a tyrannosaur eating a healthy apatosaur before we know the answer.
Yeah,
and it's just going to be fortuitous that we discover, some sort of really cool fossil that lets us answer that question. And until then, it's just these are kind of funny questions that, 10-year-olds can ask and hold them in the back of your mind. But with the giraffe's neck, you could probably look at their ancestors in the fossil record and kind of try to tease it out the best you could using fossils. But, all we have is like a handful of giraffe species, and we can observe their behavior, and otherwise it's kind of hard to say.
Yeah, the funny thing about all this in paleontology, especially dinosaur paleontology, any sort of hypothesis like this, it always drives a lot of debate, a lot of heated debate. Like the T-Rex predator scavenger debate is a big one.
Do they yell at each other at conferences about this?
Oh yeah, there are a whole
Do they really?
symposia about such things. But talking about animal weaponry and that sort of thing, there's a lot of examples just in dinosaurs that we have no clue about. The ceratopsians, the horned dinosaurs, are a great example because there's really no differences between males and females in terms of their frills and their horns. So, like Sean was saying, if you're to presume that they're strictly for defense or for mating privileges, why do the females have them? So, and we've got armored dinosaurs with big clubs on their tails, Stegosaurus with spikes on its tails and big plates on its back. So there's any number of examples. But you oftentimes find papers published about these sorts of things. And I talk about it a little bit like in historical geology class or something. And I like to compare, your typical Cretaceous dinosaurs that we've talked about millions of times on this show to African mammals. Because you see a lot of similarities in terms of their form, but also again, presuming that those similarities relate to behavior. And students like that sort of thing. So you can look at a rhino, for example, and compare it to a triceratops or T-Rex to a lion.
So what kind of correlates all these questions? Because I'm going to officially call this episode what 10-year-old people ask, 10-year-olds ask, 10-year-old questions, right? Because these are good things for us to ponder on, and we're kind of still in that same kind of sentiment, It's really cool because we're still seeking these answers all together, which I really find very graceful with humanity,
And some of these are still some of the best questions that are still unanswered. In biology, I feel like there's really two realms. There's two things that biology have not discovered that they're kind of the final frontier. One of them is why we dream. We still don't have an answer for that. What the function, the adaptive significance of sleep in general is, and why we dream, we don't know that.
Don't you know, Sean, we're all one consciousness experiencing self subjectively. There's no such thing as death. Life is but a dream, and we're the imagination of ourselves. Quote Bill Hicks.
I forgot that part of the textbook.
That was a Bill Hicks textbook.
Yeah.
Bill Hicks wrote a textbook. Wow.
In his mind.
Yeah.
So which we all write in our mind, and maybe textbooks, and even so back in the day there was a book called Tell Me Why. I don't know if you remember that, but it was in all the schools, all the elementary schools, and kids around 10 years old would submit different questions to Tell Me Why. Mm-hmm. And so they would publish this book with all the kids' questions, and they would have the answer to them. And I actually had a question that I posed to Tell Me Why, which was nationally published in that book, which I was so excited about. I was like, oh my God!
Are you getting residuals for that?
No, I'm not, but it's still there. You can still buy the book.
In the shadow of greatness right now.
I'm telling you, dude. And all it was the 10-year-old Conley question of where do we get our last names? That was all I was asking.
That's a good one.
But it was a good question. Yeah. You know, my little interview journalistic mind kind of resonated all the way back then. But that kind of moves us on. We have. Let me see here. We got about 5 minutes left. We can kind of allude to the next thing. Like, we can kind of carry on with the young mind. Is there something biologically in the young mind that makes us more adapt to want to ask these questions? Is it because we're newer in the world and we don't have the distractions that the world like keeps us in? Like, or what makes inquisitive young minds, Sean?
Wow. That's a really great question.
Tell me why, baby. Publish it right now.
I mean, and people are. This kind of is a good segue to the other great unanswered question of biology, which is like the nature of consciousness and how the brain does what it does. And that's what all these big tech companies are trying to study this. To kind of dominate the AI field, right? Artificial intelligence.
Oh boy. And I have actually a segment on the AI field we'll get to later. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. But those two things are completely interlinked. And that is like, so for example, after figuring out how DNA works, which they, Watson and Crick called that the secret of life. And then figuring out how DNA codes for protein and makes bodies is what Crick called the second secret of life. We already know those two secrets. Those are two huge questions that a 5-year-old might have asked back in 1934 that we have answers for. We know exactly how that works. It's mind-blowing that we know how that works. And we didn't know 100 years ago how any of that worked. We didn't know what DNA even did 100 years ago.
We didn't even know what genes did.
Well, yeah, we didn't know. We knew how genes kind of work, but genes were just this hypothetical thing that Mendel had come up with, and he understood the mathematics of how it does its thing, but we didn't know what the physical basis for it was. We figured all that out. Crick was a really good, good scientist. Was his next project after figuring out the two secrets of life was figure out how consciousness works, how the brain works, and we don't know. And my guess is it could be just as simple and as elegant as how DNA works. It could be. I mean, it often is, because biology is lazy. It figures out really easy, simple ways to make things happen.
Mm-hmm. But isn't DNA just a fingerprint of our past?
Sure, it's inherited, but the way it works and the way the structure is so simple. And it's not binary. It's got four coding things, right? It's not quite binary, but it's almost binary. It's four things. It's not zeros and ones. It's four possible things that give you all this complexity. And it could be, consciousness could be that simple, but how do you test the question? How do you even ask? And they're starting to ask, and that's really interesting stuff. And that's where we are. That's what we're trying to figure out.
And that's what's cool about it, because we've come to a point to where we kind of abandoned or forgot the zeros and ones, as the great band Fair Midland would say.
Back to the childhood thing, right? The human brain has to get in gear and get going in the first 5 years. Think of all the stuff you're learning, all the words and what they mean, all the associations. And you're learning a language, right? Any human being can learn any language on Earth very quickly, as long as you're 3, as long as you're 2. If you're older than that, it sucks. It doesn't work very well. It's almost impossible for someone our age to learn a new language, especially a really different one. Yeah. And that's amazing. Imagine if we could keep that same brain capacity that a 2-year-old has into adulthood.
Yeah, just without the picking of
I mean, I know
boogers
some people right now that have that same brain capacity, but still. But,
Yeah.
All right, well, we're about to go to our first commercial break. When we come back, I have a great add-on to your AI question and the fact that people are creating their own languages. So we're going to get to that right after this quick commercial break. All right, and we are back. This episode is kind of all over the place, but in a good way, because I really appreciate the fact that we're kind of just throwing the ball back and forth and kind of adapting to each other's acknowledgement of what thought is and consciousness and science and the stem from where it lies. And so we were talking last segment about AI. You brought it up, Sean. And AI is very powerful. And recently in news, there was a powerful AI named Doll-E that has started creating its own secret language. And nobody on Earth, no person, knows what the secret language is. They can't decipher it yet. And also, someone told that same AI, this is what's so weird about humans, like to insert Kermit the Frog into different movies and TV shows and match each one's style. And the results came up with probably the next episodes that we're going to produce for the next 10 years. So that's how impressive it was. It was insane.
I'm glad they've got this highly technological advanced AI working on Kermit the Frog cartoons. That's great.
I thought it was hilarious. What are we think? Or have we gone insane? Or is AI kind of engineering us to be like the cows of the Cretaceous? What's
I hope
going
not.
on here?
It kind of is, though. At least some technology is.
But the fact that it created its own secret language that nobody else knows, don't you look at kids and you can kind of see kids, y'all have kids, y'all see them play at the park and stuff. They have their own little language that they're kind of doing by themselves. I don't know if they really know what they're talking about, but who knows?
Yeah. Yeah. And they're not doing it for global AI conquest. They're doing it for fun.
Are they? I don't know, man, because they dominate your life. Dude, I guarantee that.
Not mine. I'm the king of my castle.
Okay. All right. Yeah. You say that next time you take out the diaper. Okay.
Yeah.
But I thought this was really cool in talking about questions and consciousness and the fact that we are actually even creating something that is going beyond what we can even comprehend.
It creeps me out, to be honest.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. When you said that it was developing its own language, I kind of got a little bit of a chill. Maybe I watched too much Black Mirror, but it's kind of creepy.
Yeah, I'm creeped out about it too. I'm mostly worried. I'm not worried about the machines taking over Terminator 2 style, but I am worried about what it's just another technology, and I'm worried about getting leapfrogged by a less than benevolent nation state that uses it to develop new weapons and whatnot. Mm-hmm. That's almost guaranteed that whoever gets this and gets it going, it's going to be able to design, the new stealth, whatever, and that we never thought of. And
what's reassuring about it is that, we have researchers using machine learning, right? AI often, that don't know these answers to the questions that are using AI to find answers to the questions that they don't know. But now it seems like there's this mysterious force that, I don't know, is it benevolent? But where does it stem? You were talking about binary, right? It really does stem technically from zeros and ones. I mean, when you're talking about computer science. So what do you think?
So
I think we need to burn it all to the ground.
Because it's all binary, we shouldn't worry about it?
No, I don't. No. I'm just saying, it seems like we've evolved past this binary statute, right? And even in our genes, from the molecular level.
Oh, yeah.
And
don't get me wrong. I absolutely believe that artificial intelligence could give us a lot of positive things. It already has, and AI was able to, what was the famous story? An AI figured out some sort of application for a chemical for a protein, something or other, with therapeutic effects that nobody had ever thought of. an AI figured out a new move in that crazy ancient Chinese game that nobody had ever thought of.
Oh, right. Yeah. And same with
right.
chess too. I mean,
it's incredible. But it's like any other technology we ever came up with. The first person with a bow and arrow was like, oh, cool, I can use this to kill a mule deer, or I can go and kill my neighbors with it. So it's just like that. As long as a benevolent society or government has the most powerful one, and I nominate the United States to be that, be that nation state.
Over there safely in Australia. Okay.
Yeah. Or fine in Australia, UK, France, I don't care. As long, it's going to be fine. But if one of the bad guys gets it first, it could really destabilize things.
Yeah, I just had a vision of Putin riding a giant robot through the middle of Moscow.
Yeah, we're really bad at self-flagellation in the U.S. I'll say that I do it all the time. I criticize things that we do, but we are a benevolent democracy. And we have had really nasty technology, right, that we came up with first, and we used it to end World War II, and we didn't use it again for aggressive purposes. And you can't say the same thing about some of the other countries that were around at that time. Mm-hmm. They would not have done that. So we give ourselves a pat on the back, and right now I think we probably are pretty high up ahead in the race for AI. We've got a good chance of getting there first, or at least just a company that's got taxpayers.
Yeah, but I mean, it seems like sometimes like things can be created and manifested through AI that aren't manifested through humans, and humans have influence from that manifestation created originally by AI, and that's what a lot of debate is about at the moment, I believe.
Yeah. And if you look at history, what it will end up being, we're thinking Terminator 2, we're thinking Dark Mirror, and it'll be way more mundane than that, right?
Oh,
like
way
the
more.
internet.
Yeah.
The internet got started. At first, it was just people, oh, wow, I can email my professor. It started like that for 4 years, and then it took off. And now, you can't get on the internet without just reading nothing but lies, and it's influencing everything in politics and practically nothing but bad ways. Who would have ever thought that, back in 1994, that the internet would be so potentially powerful and poisonous? And now we're looking at it. It'll be mundane. It'll be something people will want to buy into. They won't recognize the perils until they're already doing it. That's probably what it'll be like.
I feel like it'll have a impact to society like cell phones, really. And the thing that worries me is kind of in the way that cell phones have been a major distraction for people and have really changed how people interact with each other. Mm-hmm. Imagine if you don't ever have to go on a date, you don't ever have to socialize with anyone because, for, however much people pay for a cell phone, $1,000, $2,000 or whatever, you have your companion AI who will always give the right answer and will always, be there and give you words of encouragement. So again, I'm going Black Mirror with it, but
it still kind of boils down to our own influence, right? And our circles, because like for me, the reason I got into computer science, the reason I respect computer science so much is the fact that you do have endless creation opportunities. And I really do believe that. But at the same time, I see people use all of these like different tools, right, that we have. And there's an app for everything. But you know what? A lot of the apps out there are just, come on, they just want your information. And they will like, there was an app that I bought that like, it did nothing. And then all of a sudden, like my information was sold. Right. And it was because they pay all this on Instagram, and I bought it off Instagram. So like there's a trigger effect here. And like you say, Sean, there's this like, delicate balance between lies and the truth. Right. And it's not really, I guess you could say it's lies, but, it's just deception, it seems.
Mm-hmm. Well, it seems like with an AI, again, if you're dealing with a benevolent entity, could be programmed to only give truth, objective data. And as we were talking about this, again, we're all kind of, pulling this episode out of our rear end here.
It's true.
But I've got a question, since we're all scientists. How would y'all feel? Let's say we develop advanced AI and can hook it up to some sort of robot, and instead of sending people to Mars, the first things to, and we're doing it with Mars rovers, of course, but if we had human-like AI things, what do y'all think about sending those to Mars instead of the first mission being an actual human manned mission? If an AI could effectively and safely land on Mars, get out, collect samples, hop back into the ship, and come back to Earth.
They could just analyze them there.
Yeah, you think about it from a practical sense.
Send the data.
From a cost efficiency standpoint, it makes no sense at all to send people to Mars.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm actually I'm going to be a weird person, because as much as I love the space program and as mind blowing and as dramatic as all that stuff going to the moon was, I feel like at this point, if you could save $400 billion by sending a really good robot to do that work and not have to build a habitation and all that crap. That $400 billion could be spent on a lot of very good things here on Earth. And so that's, people argue that just about the space program in general, that it's a waste of money.
All Elon Musk has to do is make a contest, and then they'll do it for free.
Yeah. And I think he will, because he's definitely on the side of the pioneering spirit, send a human, and so that's how it's going to go. But eventually, if taxpayers are paying for this, it makes no sense to send people.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. But what about other jobs? What if?
Yeah, they're already doing our other jobs.
Let's send deep sea rovers all over the place looking for things. It doesn't make any sense to send divers down to the Milwaukee Deep to look for things. That's not cost effective either. If you can send a drone that's the size of my laptop with incredible cameras and all kinds of other things to go study the deep sea, it's the same thing.
Well, we have about 8 minutes left, so let me ask this question. How is that any different from? Okay, and I read about this today too. It's amazing. The progressive type movement in our society, human behavior, and how it's kind of progressed throughout the last 50 years, 50 to 100 years. We have appliances to do our work for us. We have things to cook for us. We have things to keep our food cold. We have printers and all this other stuff that completely progress our technology to where we don't have to do nearly as much work. So where does it end? Where does it end? Do we just keep going until it just takes it all over, or
That's what's his name? That's Facebook man's goal, right?
Mm-hmm. The Metaverse.
Facebook man. Who am I talking about?
Zuckerberg.
Mark Zuckerberg.
Zuckerberg. Yeah, he's gonna start a universe, right? It's gonna to where everybody just it's all meta. It's all fake, and he's gonna try to make it so amazing and real that people would rather do that than anything else. He'll probably figure out a way. Imagine if you go into this whatever 3-dimensional video game and it's almost reality, or it is.
Mm-hmm.
It's better than reality because you can have anything you want. You can do it. You can be whoever you want. You can
Yeah, but where's the consequence of death?
It's all nobody will even know what that is. You'll be you live in that thing since you're 6 years old. You don't even you just
so he's
going to
suck our souls out.
Yeah, okay. Exactly. But I'm
not game for that. But.
No. If it was that good, where you could have and do and be whoever you wanted to be, who would want to live in the real world?
Yeah. Well, there are already games and things like that. From what I understand, I was listening to a podcast and it was a comedian. They were interviewing a comedian, and this guy basically spends, 12 hours a day sitting with a VR headset on in front of his computer in one of these meta universes or whatever they call them.
Duncan Trussell?
It wasn't Duncan Trussell.
Okay.
It was a comedian. I can't remember his name. But anyway, he was talking about it, and with digital currency, with Bitcoin and all of that, there's currency for this metaverse, right? So there's an economy. With modern computer graphics, you can make it look pretty realistic. And so what this guy was saying, it was really, to me, it creeped me out because I like being outside. I like experiencing the real world. Yeah. But this comedian would have stand-up nights, with like open mic nights in his metaverse.
In the VR. Yeah, and I actually, like, me and my cousin have a Vive, a VR headset, and it's really hard once you're so saturated into that VR universe. Like, when you come out, you look at your hand and you're like, I don't know about this.
My hand was better in the VR.
Like, the graphics suck out here, like, it's just so weird. Like, because.
And it's only going to get better. It's going to get photorealism inside those things.
Yeah, but then you're going to have to ask yourself, where is the central nervous system of all this? Like, like, you're constantly being manipulated. Are we? Like, I don't know. That's a good question. Like, you keep, like, pulling the thread back towards you, and you're finding different things. Just like that 10-year-old question asking, okay, I'm in this, like, VR now, right? Why is the sky blue, or why is, giraffes' necks?
Wow.
You know what I'm saying?
And think about this. When the first movies came out in, like, 1900s, they had an image of a train coming into a station where it was filmed from the sidewalk, like just off center from the train. It's coming towards the audience. The audience freaked out and thought the train was going to come out of the screen and run them all over. They'd never seen anything like it.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Wow.
And that's a movie screen. It's two-dimensional, it's obviously fake. It was black and white and shitty and jumpy, the old early 20th century footage that was like cranked too high. And people all thought they were about to get run over by a train. So imagine what we're talking about. People won't know what's real and what's not. And people will not. But in a way, for like a conservationist, it's great. Nobody's going to go anywhere anymore. They're all going to stay at home. And the environment will just regrow. And for the few degenerates and misanthropes like us who love to go out on the trail, it's going to be great.
It will be great.
We won't want to plug in. We'll know, but we'll be the last generation of people who experience real life.
But like in one of my favorite movies, Children of Men, you have these adventure, like, pioneering kind of, like, spirits, like what we do. We go out to Big Bend. We go out and we hike. We explore the world. We love adventuring, That's just in our DNA. That's what we love to do. But then you have that same kind of pioneer.
Yeah, that's there, but also it's in our DNA to want to be narcissistic dictators if we wanted to be, right? If it's in our DNA to sit around all day and watch girls in bikinis.
Yeah, that's
right?
That's what I was about to
else.
say. It's like there are going to be some other uses for those metaverses aside from.
Of course, it's going to be all the or to eat all day and never feel satiated, just to taste the flavors, all those base kinds of things that the gluttony, the 7 deadly sins. Let's just say it. All that is part of our DNA too.
Yeah,
right?
that'll be the.
So that'll transcend right along with us.
Yeah, that'll be the start menu for the Metaverse program. 7 choices.
Well, we got our last segment coming up. We're going to kind of answer all these questions and leave you in complete wonder.
Yeah, we're not going to answer any questions.
We're not going to answer any questions, but we're going to ponder on them, just like that 10-year-old pondering on why the sky is blue. Right after this quick commercial break.
All right, we're back with the Science Knights, and we're talking about some freaky stuff, AI and all that, and like robots taking over the planet, and really just kind of talking about weird existential questions. So, where we left off, Conley had to step outside, but he's coming back in, so you might hear some weird background noises. We were talking about the metaverse and this creepy sort of alternate world that people may live in the near future. And we talked about how that would affect our reality, and Sean and me and Conley all agreed that we'd still be out traipsing around in the desert and doing fun stuff outside. But, 100 years from now, there might not be any need for people to do that.
Yeah,
No, there will be.
I worry about the development of the human brain in that kind of environment. It's already kind of starting to happen. People, especially students, some people in higher education feel like rote memorization is a terrible thing and a terrible way to learn. But I'm always like, no, shut up. A huge, significant part of what the human brain does is memorize things, and you need to be able to do it. And you need to be able to train your brain to do it. There's nothing wrong with it, and it is a skill that you can get better at. And so if you don't have to memorize anything, if you don't have to know anything, and anytime you think of something like, oh, what's the capital of Britain, I better go look it up. Mm-hmm. What does that do to your brain? Because your brain, the higher functions that people really think are awesome, that higher education think are awesome, abstract thinking, making connections, all that depends on having a bunch of stuff in your brain to begin with.
Right.
Before you can make any of those cool connections and creative things and tie it all together, you have to know something. And if you never know anything, I don't think you can do the other part.
Well, yeah.
So that's where I think that's a huge problem. It's already happened. I see people like, instead of looking through a field guide to identify a plant, which I think is an incredibly cool mental exercise and something you can get good at, people crowdsource everything now. They put a plant on Facebook and say, hey, is there anybody out there who knows what this is? And they don't go through the trouble of looking it up and getting that good mental exercise that goes with that. And I think that's definitely making us dumber. And it's going to make society as a whole way dumber. And then what we're talking about, this metaverse thing where you're just in this vacuum and you're being plugged in and everything is just fed to you, that's going to make human brains incredibly stupid.
Well, the dystopian part of that is if we program this AI to sustain us doing this, in other words, we're perfectly fine as a society plugging in and never plugging out, living in the perfect world in our own brains, the AI will still be out there doing stuff, finding resources, making discoveries, so they can sustain these weird blobs of humans that are plugged into AI.
That's what I was talking about.
I love that.
Like,
Shiller. There's never been a science fiction movie like that where the slaves are the smart ones, right? And the blobby overlords are total morons, and they're just going around serving them. I love that.
Yeah.
But dude, it's no different than now. Like if there's a solar flare that happens right now and takes out all the electricity in America, the only ones that are going to survive are the like tribal ones that didn't even know electricity existed, or those crazy people in the bomb shelters and stuff.
Terralinguans will be totally fine.
Oh, they'll be good.
Yeah, they'll be good.
You know what? I'm going to Terlingua if that happens.
Terlingua Terry knows how to survive.
Terlingua Terry.
Get out of here, Terry.
But seriously, the meek shall inherit the earth. That's kind of what the Bible said. I'm just saying.
Yeah, well, if the AIs inherit the earth, then you're talking the
AIs
robot
need
overlords.
electricity. They need programming. They need some kind of external source, right? Like we need an external source. That's the sun, right? The sun is our electricity and water, right? So
I think we should call this. I've got an idea for a science fiction story. We should call it The Matrix. I don't know if anyone's thought of this before. But I think we got something here.
There should
guys.
be two pills people can take.
That's what this is.
Yeah, dude.
Shiller, that's the different interpretation of the Matrix. All those blobby battery people plugged into the Matrix.
Yep.
Are being served by the little octopus critters.
Yeah.
That's how that really worked. It's not the other way around.
Yeah. Didn't we want to talk about octopi? We got 2 minutes.
That was the segue.
Well, we got about 4 minutes
4
left.
minutes. Octopi are really cool. This has been a great episode.
Anyway, but
I found an octopus. I went to the beach here in Australia, and I told Stanley, I was like, I'm going to catch you an octopus. And my wife was like, don't tell him that. It's going to be harder than you think, and he's going to be super disappointed if you don't succeed. So we go to these tide pools, and I'm looking around.
Like the ones they sell at Dollar General?
No, not Tide Pods. Tide pools.
Okay, sorry.
So these rocky pools, there's all kinds of cool critters, crabs and everything. And I'm starting to lose hope, and Stanley's back there looking expectantly, and I see this tentacle come out from under a rock. And I'm like, oh. And I'm like, this is either a octopus or a brittle star. And either way, it's going to be cool. So I flipped this. I realized I tried to dig this thing out, and it's not happening. So I realized this rock, I can flip it. It's not wedged into the substrate. So I flip it. And this thing, like some sort of an alien creature, goes squirting out and finds a smaller rock to get under. And I see its eyes protruding from behind the smaller rock, these evil goat eyes. And it turns purple in a second. And it's looking at me with hate in its eyes.
Do you think it's fear? Hate? Do you think it's really
not
hate?
Not fear. I know I can look into the eyes of another person, and this
but
was
it's
another
not a person. It's octopus.
This thing was a person. It was an octopus. It was the most intelligent thing I've ever caught, and it looked at me with sheer hate. And I tickled it into a bucket, and it immediately shot its. I tickled it with a little shovel. A little shovel. I was very.
My
careful.
uncle tickled me when I was about like 14 years old.
We'll talk about that off air. We might need to.
So it gets into the bucket, squirts its jets at me into my face, and just water, not ink. And I've got it. And I go over and check it, and everybody, I'm going nuts. It's about the size of a softball, tentacles, the whole thing. This is the coolest part. And we'll leave the show with this because it's a very intelligent animal. At one point, it decides to crawl to the edge of the bucket, and I'm like, "Hey guys, look! It's about to crawl out." And this octopus is about 2 feet above the sand. And instead of just flopping onto the sand out of the bucket, which anything else would have done, a crab, a fish would have just flopped. This thing has never experienced gravity in its life, right? It lives underwater. This thing does a front flip off the bucket, using its tentacles as leverage and as ballast to flip. Does a front flip out of the bucket onto the sand and then starts crawling away. How does this animal know what a front flip is and how to do it? Mm-hmm. It's an octopus. It's an aquatic animal. It doesn't live in gravity environment. How does it even do? This thing is more intelligent than we are, and we got to watch out for them.
Well, there was another, and we'll do this on another episode.
Into the metaverse,
but there was
we should not plug them into the metaverse. They will become our 8-legged overlord.
Yeah, got to read some H.P. Lovecraft.
Call it Cthulhu. That's what I was about to allude to. But they are like actually studying octopi right now, or octopuses, or whatever you want to call them, as the closest thing to anything that would think intelligently as an alien would. Like an actual alien from another planet. Mm-hmm. So there's actual science backing this up. We have to do an episode on this, and we will do that. But it's been a fantastic episode. Anything y'all want to wrap up with? Because I've been very entertained.
I've loved this episode.
None of this is real. You're in the metaverse. If you're listening to this, unplug.
I'm telling you, man. I'm telling you. It's truth shall set you free.
I think I'm going to watch TV for the rest of the day.
Oh, don't do it. Don't do it. Turn it off, man. Turn it off. Don't be manipulated. All right, everybody. This has been the Science Nights in the Morning. We will see you next week with another fantastic episode. Thanks for listening to this episode of Science Nights in the Morning. Be sure and follow us on Patreon for exclusive gear and uncut episodes. Check out the latest science articles on our Facebook page and subscribe to us on YouTube and your favorite podcast listening app. You can also listen every Saturday at 10 a.m. Central Standard Time at BigBenRadio.com. And if you got a question, we'll join the discussion. Hit the hotline at 432-217-1983 and record your message. We couldn't do this without you, and thank you so much for listening each and every week. That's Science Nights in the Morning with a K, and we'll see you next time.